Welcome to Sports Night in Quarantine. I'm Delaney Barrow, and today I'm joined by Andy Hewling. The latest news in the world of sports is that the NCAA has delayed making a decision on fall championships because they're waiting to see what more conferences do for their regular season play. Andy, I think this is a smart decision. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree to a certain extent. I think obviously, there's still a lot of things that they need to know. I know that some commissioners are still waiting for more information about the virus and what doctors are telling them. So that's going to create some things, going into August that they still need to process before they make a right decision. But at the same time, I do think that it's getting to the point where I think a lot of people are getting impatient. So I think they need to make a decision very soon, or a lot of people are just not going to be patient with them. So yes, I think ultimately it's a good call just to wait a few more weeks before they make a decision on the sports.
Yeah, I agree. I think at the moment it seems like a good decision, but those conferences really need to make their decisions about whether or not they're pushing their fall sports this spring or if they're just going to stick to a conference only football schedule. I mean, I think that the NCAA should give the conferences a deadline because, like you said, it's hard to keep waiting around and not knowing, and decisions need to be made even though there is so much uncertainty still with the growing numbers. But there have been some positives recently. I mean, just the other day, Clemson came out with the news that they have had 0 positive tests after that overload of positive cases a couple weeks ago. So I think that the more time over the summer that these teams have spent working out, they've seen the numbers kind of level out, which is good and also shows promise for the state of football this fall. Have your opinions changed about whether or not you think that we are going to have football this fall?
I think it's changed a little bit. I think that obviously the NCAA is working their best to make sure that it is safe to play. I think as long as there are no fans, I think, or really just limited fans, I think college football can happen. It's not going to be, I think it's really not going to be easy for the players because I feel like they're going to be under some tight leashes from their coaches and their athletic directors and staff as far as what they can do during the week. I know going to class will be a big deal for them, but also I don't think they're going to be able to do as much in their personal lives because of social distancing and things like that. So I feel like they're going to be pretty kept away from everyone else, which is understandable, but it's the only way to stay safe and make sure that, they're doing the right things to each week so that way they can play football. Now, I will say, I think getting into the season, I will be interested to see what happens as far as like when the actual games happen. Like, does contact on each other, when you're tackling someone, putting using hands to block or whatever, things like that, does that create a situation uh, where maybe if someone is positive, does that spread a case? I will be interested to see if that happens because I know that football has been named a high risk sport by the NCAA because of those reasons, because of the amount of contact made on body to body in a game. I don't know if that is, a thing because like I know being outside, like that's a whole different like dynamic, but you're still getting close to people. So it'll be interesting to see if there are any cases this fall. Does it come from the actual game itself, or does it come from an outside kind of force?
Yeah, that will be an interesting statistic to watch. I know that some companies have come out with supposedly corona safe face shields to go on the helmets, and hopefully those would slow the spreading of the virus if a player happens to have it. But like you said, there is going to be a tight leash on those players, making sure that they're making the right decisions and not just going about having their normal social life, which having a social life, obviously as a student athlete in college, you don't have that much extra time because so much of your free time is spent perfecting your craft and also studying and getting those required grades. But that will be a huge issue because they're going to have to make sure that they really do prioritize their sport in order to make sure that they're able to have a full season. And I think that it shouldn't be too hard, especially for those players on scholarship who realize the amount of work that they need to put in and how important it is that they stay healthy in order to keep that and keep playing. But that will be another interesting thing to watch throughout this season, and especially because football is such a big moneymaker for so many colleges. I think that everybody is getting super anxious, especially because we're nearing the final week of July. We need some news ASAP. Hopefully, the SEC will come out soon. But, I mean, unless they delay it like the NCAA did, I don't know what their decision is going to be at the moment. What do you think that their next move should be?
Well, I think for starters, obviously football is the main sport they need to figure out. But also, a lot of teams, especially Auburn, a lot of football teams pay the budgeting for other small sports. Now, Auburn, they paid the budget for cross country and also volleyball, tennis. I've heard. I'm sure there's a few more that football pays, but I know some of those fall sports are being covered by the football budget. Now, I think that that plays a part into the discussion about football is that these schools are not going to be able to play other sports if there is no football on campus. I know from Auburn that they said the budget would not cover for those fall sports. That's why the SEC has pushed back on those fall sports because a lot of those schools use their football budget to pay for those fall sports that happen. So I wonder, I think the NCAA is going to have to decide if football is canceled, what do we do about those other fall sports that some of those schools use their budgeting to pay for? And I think that should be a factor that they consider. It should be their next move, really, to me, is to determine what to do about those other sports after they've made a decision about football. And if they do cancel, how do you even have a season in some of those other sports?
Yeah, you make a really great point. Obviously, the health and safety of the student athletes should be every school's priority, but at some point, the money does have to come into play, and you have to figure out the safest way to go about that while also ensuring that you're able to have a season because, like you mentioned, football covers the budget for so many other sports, and like we said, that if football's the only sport to happen this fall, some people are not going to be happy, but you can't please everybody. And you just have to think about, are you willing to make that sacrifice? Because if you don't want football to be the only sport and you'd rather just not have a football season, are you also okay with not having any other sports seasons and potentially cutting these programs? So the ramifications could last for years if there is no football season. So even if it's in the spring, I think that a better option instead of just pushing football into the spring would possibly be keeping football in the fall, but then pushing those other fall sports to the spring. I think that that could be a potential because as long as they do have football and they're able to fund those other sports budgets, I think that is a better option. And hopefully that would satisfy those people who would be disappointed if football was the only fall sport because they would still get to see their other sports just during a different season. But hopefully we'll have a decision on that in the next couple days, maybe weeks. But opening day in MLB has come and gone. Andy, did you tune into any of those games?
I watched the Yankees Nationals game. Giancarlo Stanton hit about a 459 foot home run, I believe, against the Nationals. showing off his power in front of a empty crowd, but everyone saw it on TV, so that was very impressive. I did watch the Braves and the Mets. It was unfortunate loss for the Braves as they couldn't put any runs on the board. They were held scoreless, but only gave up 1 run, so that wasn't too bad. It was just a nice home run from Cespedes. Just he got a hold of it and drilled it out of the left field fence. I heard about the A's and the Angels game last night where it was tied 3-3, but the A's hit a walk-off grand slam in the 10th inning. So those were a few of the games I watched. I know there were others, but I thought the biggest news, though, was that the Blue Jays are going to Buffalo to play baseball, which don't know how that's going to work, but I guess they're going to make it happen because they got banned from their own city to even play baseball, which I don't know how that happens, but I guess Toronto just didn't feel like they could play in isolation against people. I don't really know, but it's a weird situation, but I guess they're moving to Buffalo to play some baseball.
That is interesting, especially, yeah, like how do you get banned from your own city? I guess that's just a case of protecting the rest of the city over and prioritizing that over the sports. They probably don't require or rely on that revenue as much. But one of the games that I tuned into was Red Sox versus Orioles. Actually started a lot stronger than I thought they would. They won 13-2, so that was really great. But I think I thought this would be a season of rebuilding for them. I mean, this could just be a fluke. I don't really have the highest hopes for the rest of the season, but so far off to a great start, and I would be pleasantly surprised if they did that well the whole season. But also starting up soon is the NBA. There have been a couple warm-up games. I know were some headlines about James Harden having a great game the other night. Are you thinking that the NBA will be able to finish their whole season, or do you think that there's a chance that it might get cut short by a bubble outbreak?
I think it will be okay. I think really the model right now down there has been the MLS. They've been able to have safe games. They've played a group stage already, multiple games going on in one day, and so far no cases. And now they're into the round of 16, starting today, and I think they're doing pretty fine. So I think the NBA, as long as they follow what has been going on in the MLS, I think they've been great. Obviously, there's been a few people that have still had cases, but they've been sent home and they've come back once they've been able to be cleared. I think, honestly, I think everything seems to be going well. So I don't worry about them, not being able to finish, but, obviously things change day by day. So we'll see.
Yeah, and you mentioned the MLS, and they do seem to be looking really good. No outbreaks or anything ever since those first couple teams dropped out. But I almost wish that these major league sports would have started their comeback seasons a little bit earlier when the curve was really seemed to be flattening, because I think that by watching those pro sports, the colleges might have been able to come up with a more feasible game plan and release that earlier. But I mean, everything is so uncertain, so it's no wonder that they had to push it back, because you just don't know what's going on, and they probably assumed that it would be getting better by now. But it would have been nice for all of this to start a little earlier. Maybe then we would have had a decision for college sports. But it will be interesting to see how like baseball, soccer, and basketball in their seasons, especially with the NFL coming out with their new testing protocols. So hopefully we'll be able to have an NFL season. I mean, they're coming out with all of the new requirements with the testing, those face shields, also the reduced fan capacity, or they just released that all fans in attendance would have to wear the masks. So hopefully we'll also have NFL, but until then, we'll be waiting for some final news from the NCAA and the SEC about football. That's all that we have for you today. Thanks for tuning in to another Sports Night in Quarantine. I'm Delaney Barrow, joined by Andy Hewling.